Howdy everyone. All right, so I'm still working on my pin box, if you will, for the cowling. I have these spacers made, and I'll demonstrate that here in a second. Again, just a quick recap. This is just an aluminum box that I made, flanged the perimeter of it, and that's what these rivets are for. These rivets are holding the box to the cowling. It's got nut plates to hold the pins. You can see a hole there for the nut plate, and there's a hole there, here, with a nut plate underneath. So the idea is that the lid is going to sit inside of this, and the spacers are going to be permanently attached to the lid with fuel tank sealant. And then a long screw will go through the lid, down through the center of the spacer, and into the nut plates that are in here. So if you can imagine, the spacer will drop in like that. Ultimately, these will be machined down to size. They'll be machine countersunk. Is that true? I don't know yet. No, actually, these will stay like they are. The lid is going to be machine countersunk because I'm using a 63 thousandths thick piece of aluminum. So that will be machine countersunk. These are going to machine, these individual standoffs will be machined short enough so that the cover fits flush with the cowling. And then what will happen is the lid will get put in place. I'll put fuel tank sealant on these, put the lid in place, and let that dry. So now these will stay with the lid. So with the lid in place and these attached to the lid with fuel tank sealant, all I have to do is unscrew the two screws, and the lid and these will pull out as a unit. And then I just pull the pins. Then I'll just pull the pins right out. So what I'm working on now is I have the lid made just enough so that it fits inside here. Now I have to start machining these down and test fitting the lid until I get these short enough that the lid will lay on top of them and fit flush with the cowling. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to machine these, keep machining these a little bit at a time until I get the lid to sit flush. At that point, I'll come back and I'll have to transfer the hole locations for these and the nut plates to the lid, and I'll cover that when I get to it. Let me get these machined, and I'll talk to you guys here in a little bit. All right, so now you can see that I have put these studs down into the nut plates. These are actually 6/32 screws, roughly 1 inch in length. I cut the heads off, and then I threaded them down into the nut plates, and that will allow me to drop in my spacers and hold them in place nice and aligned with everything else. So at this point, all I did was pull these out and machine them a little bit at a time until I can get my cover plate to rest on here nice and flush. So now I have to figure out how to transfer these holes into the back side, the underside of this plate, so I can drill the plate and then be able to drop screws through the plate, through the spacers, and into the nut plates. So I have some points that I can drop down in here, and then I could put the plate over top and hit it, and that would basically punch marks on the backside. The problem is those points stick up quite a bit, and I really can't use them in this circumstance because the plate would just float on top of those points. I need it to sit down in here so that this is aligned with the cowling and then be able to match these holes to it. So I have to figure out how I'm going to do that. That's the next step, is to get this drilled. And when I get that figured out, I'll talk to you guys later. So here's the finished product. Of course, these are not the correct screws. These are whatever they are, 82-degree countersunk screws instead of the proper 100. The plate is machine countersunk for 100 angle on the screw heads, the appropriate angle. I don't have long enough number 6 screws, but I just grabbed these to pull this down and see how it looks. As far as locating the holes, I did what I've done many times in the past. With the plate off, I just laid a ruler across the center line of the holes underneath and marked lines like you see here. And then I put the plate in place and then just lined up the ruler again with these lines, and wherever the lines cross is where I put my hole. That usually works pretty darn good. So that's it. This plate is finished. All I have to do is deburr the edges. I have not done anything with the edges. Deburr the edges and then get some appropriate screws that are long enough. So this is done. Well, it's done for now. At this point, when I get the correct screws, I'm going to take this off. The plate will come off. I'll put some fuel tank sealant on those spacers, and I'll put the plate back on, screw it down, and let that fuel tank sealant dry. And that will, in effect, make the plate and the spacers one piece. So I'll pull this off. I'll take the screws out, pull this off with the spacers still attached, and then I can pull my pins. So that's it for now with this. I think I'm going to move on to doing some cowling work. I have some holes here that were left over from Clecos when I had done the inlet ramps. Obviously this needs to be sanded. I've got some stuff like this. I don't know if this will show up, but there's some epoxy here. This is really rough with epoxy. When I had epoxied the inside of the cowling, some of it got on the outside. So I'm going to do some cowling work. I've got some marks here. I'm going to redo these, but I'm going to put screws and everything into the cowling as if I was getting ready to take a flight, and come back and clean up some of these edges around here. And around here, I need some more space in here. This is actually touching. Things like that. Here are some more holes that need to be sanded. So I'm just going to get the cowling prepped. Initially, I'm going to start prepping the cowlings for vinyl. But I just want to make sure that my gaps and spaces are all good. Everything is sanded if it needs to be sanded, and get it ready for vinyl. So I think that's the next step. But wherever I go next, you guys will follow along. All right. Talk to you guys later.